basketball can be a mysterious sport.
The team whose logo is in this envelope will have the first pick in the NBA draft.
Watch James. Now wanted a timeout, but too late to get it. And 5 minutes go up on the clock. Overtime here in game one.
Will Giannis win a title in a Milwaukee Bucks uniform?
It's hard for me to say that, Jay, considering how loaded the Lakers are. I don't know if you've been watching Taylor Horton Tucker over the last couple of days.
But what if those mysteries could be solved? What if those conspiracies are reality? The hoop truth is out there. Can you handle it? I'm Agu at _Goosifer. That's Goosifer with an L if you care. A lifelong Milwaukee Bucks fan.
And I am Nick Andre at Nick Andre ATR on Twitter. Lifelong Warriors fan.
Welcome to the first episode of Hoop Truthers. I introduced you a little bit there, Dre. I don't really care. I'm sure you don't care that much either. Here is what you guys can expect in today's episode, this week's episode. Dre and I are going to start with our games and teams of the week. We don't do players of the week here because the NBA does their own awards. We could talk about them if we do. Then we'll do a segment on the Pacers and the Sacramento Kings with a very special guest and wrap up with some of our fave picks and last thoughts. The Hoop Truth is out there. Let's go find it. Dre, this is a nice week, man. This is a long week.
It's been a great week. All-Star game is around the corner.
We just had the trade deadline, man. Like,
oh, yeah. Oh, my God, yes.
It's nonstop content. If you're not consuming our content, consume some of the content that's out there, man. Like, there's great stuff, and we're going to cover it in our fave picks. Let's start with Game of the Week. Dre, you've watched some basketball a little bit this week, as you often do. I would say both of us watch a decent amount of basketball in any given week.
Like, the TV has to be on NBA action. If not NBA, NCAA. If not NCAA, then high school. Basketball, all around the TV screens. But mostly NBA.
Especially for Dre, man. I usually keep it to NBA. I'm a bit of a phony that way. But Dre is always watching everything. Oftentimes, I can see the game in the reflection of his glasses while we're recording. I think I can see it right now. I've got a game of the week that I want to talk about, and it's not necessarily like the best game of the week, but it's the game that I watched that I want to talk about. Dre, I want you to start, though. What was your favorite game watching this week? Give us a little bit of thoughts on why, too.
So this week, I'm gonna hurt some New Yorkers. Wednesday night action, it went down. The Battle of New York, Madison Square Garden. New York Knicks, Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are obviously, after coming off of the Ben Simmons trade, which Ben has not played for the team as of yet. The Nets are also still without Kevin Durant, and of course Kyrie. Even though it was a home game for the Nets, Kyrie Irving could not play because the game is, of course, in New York. So the Knicks, obviously, R.J. Barrett, Julius Randle, Evan Fournier, you name it. You know what I'm saying? So they have their full roster, or the majority of their roster, is available for this matchup in New York.
Well, I don't think RJ was there.
Oh, you didn't play? Yeah,
I think RJ and Rose are still out, but they were still healthier than the Nets for sure.
Exactly, without question. So I know this is a regular season game. This is the last game going into All-Star break, but it's the Battle of New York. You know, everybody's going to gill for this game. I'm sure New Yorkers were pumped for this game, especially being at the Garden where it's always rocking. You name it. So first quarter, or actually I'm going to say first half, it was all Knicks. Everyone was rolling. They led by as many as 28 points. But then something switched for the Nets. And obviously it wasn't KD. It wasn't Kyrie. It wasn't Ben Simmons. It was a guy.
Your boy.
Who wears number 24, not Kobe. Rest in peace of Kobe. Rookie out of LSU. Cameron Thomas went bananas. 16 points in the fourth quarter, basically closed the game out. Like one of the last possessions of the game, he put up a step back three, and I absolutely lost it.
Yeah,
in my
I
room.
saw that.
Oh my god, like that is insane. The Knicks obviously blew a 28-point lead. It's just been a disaster year for the Knicks. They might as well just wrap it up. I'm probably not even going to watch another game for the Knicks. It's just it's insane to see how they went from being such a great team last year to just being so disappointing this year. But that was definitely my game of the week. Shout out to the Nets for getting a big win. They have now won 2 straight after losing 11 in a row, which is insane considering the Brooklyn Nets not lost 11 straight games. Like that's insane.
They're
But
squarely in the play-in tournament right now.
yeah, no, it's crazy. Like just like maybe a month ago or 2 months ago, they were like the first seed in the East, which is insane. But yeah, definitely a big win for them. Also, shout out to Seth Curry. Seth Curry, who's one of the underrated factors in this trade. Obviously, we know Ben Simmons is the bigger name, but I think Philly is going to regret trading Seth Curry, and we're going to see it. I think he's going to be a great compliment alongside guys like Kyrie and Ben Simmons, obviously. But yeah, Seth Curry was definitely an underrated factor in that trade, and we're seeing it in his first few games with the Nets so far this year. So that was my game of the year. I know it was pretty long. Congrats to the Brooklyn Nets. Cam Thomas, my guy, who has actually been balling out recently over the past few weeks. He had a 30-point game against Utah. I think he had another 30-point game against the Wizards last week. So shout out to Cam Thomas and shout out to the Nets.
Streets are saying that the Nets have the best Cam in New York.
Yeah.
They won't play Reddish, man. They won't play Reddish,
which is another reason why I was not a fan of the trade. See, they killed me when I said I was not a fan of the trade because I knew that Tibbs was not going to give him the minutes.
The Knicks are sad. Free plug for myself. I wrote an article for Sir Charles in Charge this week. Losers of the NBA trade deadline, and the Knicks are absolutely on there for not selling any veterans or making any upgrades to the roster. They're just trotting along with this congested roster with too many players at this point. Before I dive into my game of the week, we're not going to spend too much time with this, but I do have some breaking news while we're recording. Anthony Davis, we saw a really ugly injury the other night, but he's out at least 4 weeks. It's not a lot of time, especially considering if you saw that injury, it looked like it could have been season ending for sure. So 4 weeks isn't that bad, but it's another missed in. Like it's another month for Anthony Davis, who just missed a month plus with an injury beforehand. He had just only recently come back. And to be fair, had played really well in his return. But Anthony Davis is back, not to make light of injuries, but 4 weeks. We're not going to talk about it anymore, but that's a little bit of news for you guys. My game of the week actually happened a week and a day ago. I'm cheating just a little bit, but it's the first episode. You're going to cut me a little bit of fucking slack here. The Sacramento Kings versus the Minnesota Timberwolves on February 9th. It was Sabonis' first game for the Sacramento Kings, as well as, of course, Jeremy Lamb and Justin Holiday, who came over in that trade before the other trades that brought in Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Jackson, and Trey Lyles. Here's what I'd like to just point out. The vibes were great, man. I haven't watched many Kings home games with good vibes in any sense. You know, they've got a nice, pricey new arena, Golden One Center, I believe it's called, and ain't nobody jumping in that thing. It's always quiet, like a goddamn golf outing or something, you know? But they were cheering their asses off, man. It wasn't full by any means, but they were cheering their asses off. Minnesota's a playoff team this year, so it's not like they were just playing anybody. It was a tight game. Sabonis and Fox both showcased why they should be the number 2 players on this team. Harrison Barnes played really well. Justin Holiday was playing crazy defense. Jeremy Lamb even hit a couple of threes. Off night was coming off the bench. Davion Mitchell, for you normies that don't know nicknames in the NBA, playing great defense. Canned a couple of threes too, which is the number one key for Davion at this point. If he can develop a consistent jumper, they might not regret trading Halliburton. We're going to talk about the Kings a little bit later with a very special guest, but I just wanted to mention that the reason I made it my game of the week is that the broadcasters, I watched the Kings home feed because I wanted to hear about that trade, but also the crowd seemed optimistic and they were having fun. And for one night, the Kings, beat a playoff team in the fourth quarter. It was a close game until the end of the fourth quarter when they just blew it open. Kings teams of past would not have done that, especially against a team with a good playoff not resume, of course, but a playoff standing like the Minnesota Timberwolves. So I really enjoyed that and I really like seeing it. Let's move on to team of the week. Dre, I'm going to start with you again. We might have the same one because there is one team that's really been doing stuff lately, but who was your team of the week? It doesn't have to be the most wins. It doesn't have to think. Who's the team that you were watching this week that you really enjoy that you want to talk about for a second?
Man, I didn't even prepare this, man. I suck. But I'm gonna go with the Pacers, honestly.
Yeah.
I know, they haven't been the hottest team, but hey, they traded for Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese Halliburton, who was actually, if you watched NBA Today on the day of on the trade deadline, Woj quoted and said that there were many franchises that were, I think they were shocked by the trade
Right.
because Halliburton had been on everyone's radar, but Sacramento seemed like they did not want to trade him. Then out of nowhere, this Indiana trade happens. They trade Halliburton to the Pacers. They get back Sabonis and a few other cats as well. Honestly, I'm liking the Pacers because for me, I love seeing Halliburton on another team. I love seeing him now get the keys as the franchise point guard, and I feel like Indiana is definitely a great move for him. So through the first few games, he's averaging around 20 points a game. I think 11 assists on 48% shooting. So he's really, I mean, even though it is a small package of what he can do, it just shows great optimism for the Pacers. Obviously, now with him being there, Miles Turner will be looking to stay, possibly, and then of course, it's just a bright future for Indy. So like I said, small package for Tyrese Halliburton, but I'm loving what I'm seeing.
It's cool. Another, the other half of that Kings trade is the Pacers, and you'll see a little bit more optimism with them too, as well, at this point, where they're playing with pace and they're playing with, you're seeing more Pacers highlights, I think, than you've seen in a hot second with Halliburton doing his thing. Isaiah Jackson's flying around. We're going to save it, though. We're talking about the Pacers in depth with, again, I'm going to keep teasing it, baby, a very special guest in a little bit.
Man.
Tune in. It's coming up.
The Truthers.
The Hoop Truthers. We got another truther joining us in a little bit. My team of the week, before they lost to the Pistons, I believe last night, which was Wednesday the 16th.
Man, I should have picked them.
That's why I thought we might have the same one, because they really are this team that's really blowing up right now. And as much as I'm not a huge fan of them, just because, I don't know, I don't really have a reason for it. It's just the East Coast fans have sometimes not been the best to players, and sometimes I have a bias against it. But the Boston Celtics have been balling lately. 9 straight wins. Maybe they got to 10 before the Pistons beat them, but still stringing together wins like you wouldn't have thought. They don't look like last year they got swept by Philly, right? As the number 1 seed. Is either them or Washington that got swept. One of them played Boston played the Nets. They played the big 3, and they got crushed because it was the big 3. They won game 3, so it was a gentleman's sweep because Jason Tatum decided to go off for 50. That was actually a pretty fun game. But they don't look like they're going to be that this year. They're not going to be a contender. They might not make it to the second round, but you're probably going to have to take them to 6 in any series to beat them. Right now, they're 34-26. They're 6th in the East, which is like really like they're not going to be in the play-in. They were in the play-in last year, and I didn't think they were necessarily better this season.
I didn't either.
They made a trade at the deadline that really bolstered it, and they didn't necessarily like underpay for either. They traded Josh Richardson, who's been good this year. Like his shot came back this season, and the defense has always been there, and a pick protected, and a swap. So it's not nothing whatsoever. But they brought in Derek White, who is a perfect fit. Could his shooting be better? 100%. 100% his shooting could be better at this point as a guard or a lead guard, and maybe they're not going to be able to play him as many minutes because of that. But in my opinion, I mean, they were already one of the best defensive teams in the league. Ime Udoka has really gotten them really disciplined. Even before this 9-game stretch, people were noting the second half of this year, the defense has really picked up. The communication has been better. The energy has been great. They really they got a lot of length on that team. But in my opinion, even with that, Derek White, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Robert Williams, that's one of like the 3-4 best defensive lineups you could have in the league right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's monstrous. It's monstrous. And it showed out. Well, also, by the way, they did bring in Daniel Tice, who was traded for Dennis Schroeder and Enes Freedom, who's been waived. Big shout outs to Enes Freedom, who's never going to be in the fucking NBA again. I seriously doubt it. Big rip bozo to fucking Enes Kanter. But they brought in Daniel Tice, who I think is like a mediocre player, but he does play well in the Celtics system. Brad Stevens loves to bring in guys that have played well there before. And the one thing I'll say about Tice is that he's been kind of healthy. Like, he's not an Iron Man, but the Celtics could use bodies because they always have injuries, especially at center with Robert Williams and Al Horford there. And he plays well in the switch scheme that they run. So really, really nice to see him back there, someone that he's thrived. This all culminated before they lost to the Pistons in a beating, just a beating of the Philadelphia 76ers, granted without depth because they did not have access to their new players. James Harden won't play until the end of after the All-Star break and maybe some time after that. And they lost a lot of depth in Seth Curry. Ben Simmons wasn't playing, but Andre Drummond. So they were playing a bit shorthanded, but they got beaten by 48. They got almost 50-pieced.
Oh yeah.
They
inexcusable.
Inexcusable. It just beat the shit out of them. And one thing that I'll mention, they're my team of the week because of that. I mean, they capped off a 9-game win streak with a 48 beating of a team that looks to be a legit contender and a team that has a number, he's probably third at worst in the NBA MVP rankings right now. The one thing I will mention is that Marcus Smart got a really nasty ankle sprain in that game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe we've heard back, Dre. We haven't heard anything about whether he's going to be okay or not, right? I mean,
I haven't heard anything, unfortunately.
Let's take a real quick look-ski here at the real Google of the NBA, which is Twitter. Latest, we've got nothing. No, I don't think they've updated anyone yet, so maybe they're still running some tests right now. Hopefully he's fine. Smart has dealt with injuries before, but he's also survived bad-looking injuries with like a sprain before, so hopefully it's that. That's going to be it for that, though. What we're going to do now, that's Game of the Week, Team of the Week, we're going to transition into the guest of the week, which I should probably make a title card for that. I'll cut this out. But a very special guest, another hoop truther, one of the best hoop truthers you'll see on the timeline is joining us in just a few seconds to discuss the Indiana Pacers and the Sacramento Kings after both of their big trades at the deadline. Now, I did promise a special guest for the first episode of Hoop Truthers, and I wouldn't say that I necessarily always deliver on my promises. I won't go as far as saying that, but we did land someone that I personally am a massive fan of. Dre is as well. If you're paying attention at all out there, you will know who they are. He is a writer for basketballnews.com, SB Nation's Fear the Sword, and 1:37 p.m., as well as podcasting for Tag the Rule and SB Nation's Indie Cornrows. So much content in so little time. You can check the TL most mornings and be able to say, wake up, babe. New Mark Schindler just dropped. Mark, how are you, man?
I really appreciate the intro, man. That was too kind. I'm doing really well. It's kind of warming up in Ohio, sort of. So it's raining instead of snowing, so I can't complain, man. My dog's finally chilling out today. He's been absolutely on one, but I'm good, man. Thank you guys for having me.
Of course, appreciate it. Yes, warming up in Cleveland, Ohio, or simply Ohio, but Cleveland, where the All-Star game is going to be happening this weekend. We've got Mark in to talk about I would say the second biggest trade of the trade deadline. Obviously, there's the blockbuster. We're going to talk about that somewhat later or earlier. We are recording this segment before recording anything else. It's our first time on video. Please give me a little bit of a break. You can follow Mark at mschindler_NBA, by the way. If you're on video, you can see it pulled up right here. But what I want to do is get started with right away. Let's talk about the trade and let's go into the Indiana Pacers, okay? You've all seen it, but I'm going to repeat it right here, right now. The Pacers traded Domantas Sabonis, Jeremy Lamb, and Justin Holiday, and a second-rounder for Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, and Tristan Thompson, as well as a couple of other trades. So we're going to start with that. I think we'll start with reactions or thoughts immediately. Mark, you do a podcast very regularly, the Indie Cornrows podcast for SB Nation with Caitlin Cooper, by the way, free plug at C2_Cooper, who has phenomenal content on her Twitter and the articles that she's doing as well. You've been covering the team for a hot second now. I mean, what were your initial reactions to the trade?
I think initially just surprise. When I got the notification, I was definitely not expecting it. Because it was, it was one of the trades that happened, a couple days before the actual deadline day. So I wasn't really fully expecting it. But also, his name had been mentioned in trade talks for a while. There had been some floated reports over the last year or so that he'd asked out because of how things had gone under Nate Bjork in his tenure. So I thought that had always been on the back burner that the team could move on from him. But just based on all reporting, he was going to demand a ransom price for what he was going to cost in return. The Pacers for what they were going to ask. And it really seemed by all accounts that Miles Turner was going to be who would be out, especially given he just hasn't been super happy in Indiana. That's changed up now. But just completely shocked by it. I think it didn't surprise me to see them make a trade and go in a new direction. But for that to be the guy who gets traded, I was surprised by that. In terms of the actual return, though, I have no faults with that valuation. Like, I think if you're going to trade a 25-year-old two-time All-Star, who I think, like, I just not to like get on a soapbox on your
Please
pod,
do.
but I feel like the last 2 weeks have been very telling of who has and hasn't watched Indiana that much, and who does or doesn't understand how Domantas Sabonis plays basketball. He's a very damn good player. I think you can make a lot of cases for why Sac did this and not have it be considered a bad trade. But for where Indiana is at right now, considering how the last 2 years have gone and needing to go in a new direction, I thought this was about as good of a trade as they could have made.
Dre, can you give me some of what you thought your initial reactions to the trade? I know that the TL, the timeline, a little bit of lingo for you guys. I don't know what I'm doing right now, but Dre, everyone was coming at the Kings for this, and we're going to talk about the Kings a little bit later. But in terms of the Pacers specifically, what were your first thoughts on the trade?
Well, if you know me, I'm a big fan of Tyrese Halliburton. Loved him during college. I didn't know that he would possibly evolve into the scorer that we know him to be right now, but he's definitely grown into that. And I even mentioned it last year. You could probably look it up on an earlier podcast. Was that I kind of knew that Halliburton was not going to be able to grow in Sacramento just because I felt like De'Aaron Fox was just their guy that they wanted to build upon. So even though Halliburton is such a phenomenal player, when it comes to the dynamic of scoring, facilitating, dictating the offense, I just knew that it wouldn't be able to work in Sacktown for him. So when this trade happened with Indiana, where they sent him, Buddy Hield, and I can't remember what else for Sabonis, I figured that this would work because now I look at Halliburton now as the franchise cornerstone. Now I look at him as the franchise guy that they can continue to build around. So that's one of the reasons why I love the trade. And then, of course, you add Buddy Hield a part of the trade as well, who I was kind of questioning, like, would he be long-term with this team, considering that they are in rebuild mode? Would you rather have Buddy Hield on a contender? But if they can make it work, those two together, and plus if Buddy is happy, then I like it.
100%. So it was, just to reiterate, Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, and they also got Tristan Thompson, who is now a Chicago Bull. Spent a couple of days with one team partner, moved on to another one. I'm sure that's a new concept for Tristan, but he's moved on to Chicago now. And actually, I think it's a great pickup. We're not talking about that, but I actually think it's a pretty solid move for Chicago. Let's move on to the new look Pacers. I really do. We're a little bit more removed from the trade deadline to do a full-on reaction pod, but we've seen a few games of this. I watched a couple of their games. The game I saw in full length was against the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm always going to watch them. I'm wearing the shirt, but it was a very fun. It's not dissimilar to what Portland is out there doing right now with these smaller lineups, really fast, really athletic. And I put down some stats. This is from Tuesday, so if they're a little bit late, that's fine. They were 0-5 with Halliburton at one point. Not that Indiana is looking to win games. They didn't make this trade to get into the play-in or the playoffs, anything like that. But surface level things that I've noticed so far is the pace 100%. Halliburton is not, from what I saw, he's not a heliocentric guy, but he's not having the lead guard 100% either. They're giving a lot of looks to Kiefer Sykes. They're giving a lot of looks to other people. And I really like these smaller centers they're playing with without Miles Turner. But we're 5-6 games with Halliburton and the other trades. I'll do them real quick. They traded Karis LeVert in a second rounder to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Ricky Rubio, who's out for the season with a torn ACL, and a 2022 first and second, as well as Torrey Craig to Phoenix for Jalen Smith in a second. Phoenix could only get Torrey Craig for Jalen Smith in a second. Is kind of unbelievable to me, but it's a great move for Indiana. Mark, you're doing the podcast. I think it was every 3 days. I was looking through the feed. It's very
like that.
Very.
We try and do it twice a week. Yeah,
twice a week, which is, the last time we released a pod was a Monday last week. So not necessarily what we're doing. Big shout out to the listeners. Love you guys. Appreciate you guys keeping up with us. But what have you noticed in these games? What are some big differences in terms of the styling and I guess specifically Halliburton's fit with both Indiana and Rick Carlisle, who doesn't always necessarily have that lead guard in his offense?
Yeah, man. It's kind of odd because even in these 4 games, I think there's been a lot to take away, but also I'm hesitant to take too much from it because, like you mentioned, in terms of fitting with other players, like we just don't really know yet. Like Malcolm Brogdon hasn't played in those 4 games.
Right.
Miles Turner hasn't played in those 4 games. Dejounte Warner hasn't played in a year and a half. And theoretically, all 3 are going to be back sometime post All-Star break. So we don't really know what he's going to look like with the majority of the starting lineup. Which is what makes it interesting. Just in terms of actual pace of play and everything, like you mentioned, I mean, they are pushing like crazy. Like the pace hasn't been ridiculously high, but I haven't sorted it just for lineups with Tyrese. I would imagine like I think they're right around league average across his 4 games for pace, but with Tyrese, it's definitely higher.
Right.
Part of where I'm hesitant with that is we saw this sort of at the beginning of the season. They looked to run out on the break more, but Rick really slowed them down. Forced him to play more in the half court, called a lot of set plays. I think he's going to get back more to that after the All-Star break with more of the starters back and with just more time for them to settle in. I would imagine, even though I don't think that's how you should play with Tyrese Halliburton. That's Rick Carlisle and it's what he does. He's not going to change his ways no matter what I or anybody else says. But even then, like just in the half court and actual ability, I was talking about this with Caitlin today. Tyrese Halliburton is the best perimeter playmaker the Pacers have had in my lifetime. Like that is not even hyperbole. That is just strictly speaking. Like
Right.
I think if you're going down a list, okay, they've had like all the point guards going back. All right, Malcolm Brogdon is probably right about up there.
George Hill.
Yeah, George Hill, who's again more of a combo guard. Darren
Right.
Collison, who was, I mean, he was functional as a 5th starter. I mean, Jamal Tinsley was a nice player, but he wasn't this level of playmaker even close. Mark Jackson, who I think is low-key pretty overrated historically.
With all
But
due respect.
like, I mean, exactly. Like you're going back to like, I mean, the ABA days when you look at the Pacers having this kind of perimeter playmaking talent. So like he has been that good and that incredible. And what's ridiculous too, like I think he's averaging 21 a game on like 64% true shooting. And I still want him to take more shots. Like he passes up a ridiculous number of shots, not in a bad way, but it's just like, he is such a willing ball mover that I just want him to take more shots. Like I think if he was taking 20 shots per game, I'd be like, this is perfect. Like it's all I need. I mean, the space creation has been legit, especially off the bounce from 3. He's had some wonkiness from mid-range. Like I think he's still figuring that part out of his game out. He had some weird isolation plays against Milwaukee. But overall, man, like the stuff that he does, manipulating taggers and just with his eyes in general is like, it's groundbreaking shit in Indiana compared to where it's been. And like, it's a very random shout out too for him, but like his off-ball defense is awesome. It's been fun for a while. That's always been a thing for him, but just seeing a guy who's that engaged and locked in off the ball defensively has not been a thing in Indiana. I mean, Duarte's been fun with that in that regard, but this team's just been kind of lifeless most of the season. So to see that has been really fun. He's just been like, I mean, these 4 games have been the most fun we've seen this whole season. It's been kind of a clusterfuck. So to go to this has been a like absolute joy compared to what it was.
Dre, thoughts on the Halliburton fit in Indiana and any other takeaways from Indiana's first couple of games after the deadline?
So I will be honest, considering that I've been busy moving. I haven't actually watched 1 game like with Indiana so far with Halliburton. So I've watched a few film on it, so I can't necessarily observe it. But
what do you think about the fit theoretically?
I like it. I like it a lot. Like it's kind of like what I'm basically just gonna reiterate. Like I think Halliburton deserves to like have his own keys as like a franchise point guard. And I feel like in Indiana it just fits so well. And then also with hopefully Miles Turner being a part of their future as well again. I feel like it's a good fit. I mean, right now through 4 games, I read the stats. He's averaging around 20 a game. I think like 11 assists, shooting like 48% for the field. So it's a small package, but it's pretty good to say the least.
It is super interesting. I'm a big fan of Halliburton. He's just everything you could ask for in a lead guard to start your franchise with. I think if you were, and lead guards are, by the way, they're going to rule the NBA very soon. You've got Garland, you've got LaMelo, you've got Ant, who's not a lead guard, but he's a flashy one. Jaws out there. It's coming a lot faster than you guys think. We're ruled by wings and ultimate bigs right now, but these guards are coming, and some of them are going to take it even faster than you think. The last thing I want to say about Halliburton, because I don't want to dwell too much on it, but the shot form is funky, which people have on Twitter, at least in the past, taken as they're going to be a bad shooter for their careers. We've seen guys with funky shots both succeed with it, like Sean Marion, and develop upon it, like Lonzo Ball. I think for the three-point shot, it doesn't matter. It takes a long time to wind that thing up, but you did mention that there was some wonkiness with his mid-range. Do you think that that's attributing to the mid-range, how much time it takes to load up the shot?
No, I don't think it was that. Because he's shown stuff throughout the last year and a half that is pretty promising for mid-range. I think it's more just been like some of the decision-making was weird. Like I thought, I'm trying to remember who he ISO'd right now. I can't like off the top of my head, but
we were playing a lot of randos that game. It could have been Wendell Livingston, man.
It was just a weird decision. Like he had a couple weird decisions late in the fourth, and I thought it would, especially with like I appreciated that he was taking the shot, but it was like the process was a little bit wonky, and that's going to be something that you want to see him develop, and I just appreciate him taking the shot. But I mean, I think that's going to be something that he's going to get to easily because he has the size, especially at 6'4". Yeah, the release point is odd, but I think it's more like he's so good at selling other stuff that I don't care as much. Like if he was I don't want to just say lower field, but like part of the reason why he's able to get his shot off from threes, which I think he's taking 7.5 threes a game since he's gotten to Indiana. And it's mostly not off movement. Like it's a lot of self-created, a lot of catch and shoot, but I mean, he's so capable of getting it off still, even with an odd release, because he's adept at using his screeners to like just toss him the ball, move, like grenade it and get it back, and get it off. Like I think that's another way of shooting. Like even I know you watch college, Nick, but like that's one of the reasons I really like Kenny Chandler. Like I know he has questions about his shot, but like even as a smaller guy, knowing how to use your screeners and just get yourself space without even having the ball is really important. I think that's something that he's started to figure out and has looked really good with in Indiana. So I'm not really worried about the shot at all. And like another side note, I'm very worried an NBA team's going to fuck up Jaden Ivey's shot. He's shooting 41%. Just don't fuck with it. It's going in. So that's all you can ask for.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, NBA teams have some sort of fetish with making the shot forms look prettier, even if it's already falling. Halliburton is up to 7.8 three-point attempts since Indiana. This is B-ball ref, so they're usually a day or two late if there's a game the night before, but that's what they've got listed there. Let's move to who is figuring to be his – I mean, I'm not saying that the Pacers necessarily chose Sabonis over Turner, not in the sense that the Kings chose Fox over Halliburton, but – Turner is assumedly the guy that's going to stick around for a while if they don't get a massive offer in the offseason, and is going to figure to be Reese's pick and roll partner, as well as a guy who has clamored for some more offensive role himself, which we see on a lot of big guys in recent years. But I don't know. I mean, like you said, you guys haven't had not even elite, let alone a very good playmaker lead guard in Indiana, and this will be the first time that Miles Turner has played with anything like looking like this. I watched Malcolm Brogdon for a lot of years in Milwaukee. He's really good. He's a really good player. He can pass the ball. He can shoot the ball, and he's slow as shit. That's just what happens. He's slow as shit, and he gets hurt a lot. He's not necessarily a floor general either. I have a lot of optimism for the pick and roll pairing of Tyrese and Miles, pick and pop, any of that stuff. How are you feeling about that? Turner, by the way, if you guys don't know, he's currently out with a stress fracture in his left foot. He was originally out 2 weeks, which was an update on January 18th. We're about a month from that. I don't see any other updates online, but we're expecting him back during the season at some point. Theoretically, because obviously we haven't seen it, how are you feeling about this pick and roll match?
I'm really interested to see how it looks. Like you mentioned, I think he's going to be awesome at getting Miles the ball. Like there have been times this year where Domas is the best player to get Miles the ball. Like it's been really odd. Like Karas's passing was really weird this season. It's looked better in Cleveland, but like he went from looking like a guy who could be the lead guard of the future for the Pacers to like just looking almost allergic to making some interior passes. But I mean, I don't want to be harsh. I'm interested just to see how different it is for him. Like he will have more opportunities to play the solo 5 with the starters, but he still played solo 5 a lot, even with Domas gone. I do think the spacing will be a little bit different because, I mean, Rick is very, like, he's pretty much 5 out or bust. Like, it took them 30 games to really transition to using Domas more as a post hub and DHO operator. So I think we'll see a lot more with Miles getting to actually play solo 5 in a more strict 5 out look. I think one of the things I'm interested to see, like, I wouldn't say that he's necessarily a bad screener, but he really struggles to screen and roll in the same possession. Like, it's either setting a really solid screen and getting his guard separation, or it's a screen that doesn't really get much bump off and he's getting good on the roll. And I think for Tyrese, I'm interested to see how that looks, because not that he doesn't have burst, like his handle's still really coming, like his handle's good, but it's just, okay, can he get enough separation with Miles still getting out on the roll? It's not like the be all end all, but I'm just interested to see what that looks like. More with him as a popper too. I think it's going to be really interesting because he hasn't gotten to do that quite as much. Like, I think it's going to be good, man. Miles hasn't had the best season by his standards. Like, he's been really good still. So yeah. I'm interested to see how it looks for his offense, but I mean, I'm excited for him to try and grasp the new role and really take the reins.
The Pacers don't get much of the national spotlight. They, at this point, I mean, the Midwest teams don't always, in general, unless you're Chicago or a perennial juggernaut like the Milwaukee Bucks at this point. And they've been sort of an NBA purgatory for a few seasons here now. I've heard, and I watched a little bit, but I haven't seen as much as I would like. And someone that I wanted to just get a quick overview, 1 minute, 2 minutes, not too long, but can you just give us and the listeners a overview of Chris Duarte, who is really I mean, they didn't draft a 24-year-old expecting to be rebuilding, but he's still a core of this team. And with Tyrese Halliburton, looks like a really solid piece of the core.
Yeah, no, Chris is really fun, man. I've enjoyed his season a ton. He's unfortunately been banged up with injuries a little bit over the last month and a half, 2 months, which has kind of hurt his play. But I think the way to look at it is he's a little bit more of a combo guard than a wing to me, especially like the way that they'll use him. They've used him as their primary point of attack guy at times. He's more of like a big 2 than a 3 to me, just with where his functional strength and everything is. But I mean, he's a legit movement shooter. He can only go off movement from one direction, which is, that's something he's gonna have to work on. But I mean, he's the best self-created shooter other than Tyrese now. But I mean, throughout most of the season, Chris has been their best shooter. I mean, he's figured out more downhill and out of pick and roll than I expected to see this year. Like, he showed some interesting stuff at Summer League, and he's already taken leaps and bounds growing from there, which has been really encouraging, especially like he's getting a lot better with his dump off passes. I still think the laydowns to the corner can be like that's where he's most prone to making some passing mistakes. But most importantly, like, the playmaking chops that he'd shown coming off second side stuff has translated a little bit to some more primary reads, which is interesting. And defensively too, like, he's a ball hawk. Like, he can make some legit plays as a rim protector, rotating over as the low man, or just, coming over late and contest. Just a really smart player, really fun player to watch, and not somebody who I think is going to develop into like an all-star caliber guy. I mean,
Sure.
Crazier things have happened, but I mean, he's already been just about a starting level player. He's started like 70% of their games. And I think they view him as the 2 guard of the future for them. Like, I love what he brings. He seems like a great guy too, by all accounts. Yeah, he brings a lot. I mean, like, not that I know you said 2 minutes, so I got like 10 seconds left. But
do it, man.
The athletic pop is what's there too, that I think you don't notice at first, that you see a lot more in transition. And like, he has some really nice explosive plays around the rim. Like, he'll just have some random verticality plays on defense, and he's had some really nice dunks too. Like, he had a game in Summer League against the Knicks where he just absolutely tore them a new one. And I don't know, man, it's been really fun to watch his growth and see his confidence too. And he's competitive as hell too, and that really comes through.
Dre, I've got 2 or 3 last thoughts on the Pacers before we move to the Kings. We've taken a good amount of time. I'm very happy with what we talked about so far. But Dre, do you have any questions on the roster, the fits, or anything in Indy?
My only last question would probably be, I don't know if you guys discussed this while I was gone for a minute, but where do you possibly see this Ricky Rubio piece possibly moving to?
Well, Ricky's a free agent, right?
Is he being a free agent?
Okay. Free agent, I believe. Do you think?
Okay.
I mean, do you think they'll? I mean, listen. Let's be honest. There's a chance that they could keep him around. Ricky's pretty much only been in the Midwest his entire career, and they've got the Cavs space to keep him. There's a bit of a conspiracy theory out there that he'll just rejoin the Cavs as soon as he's healthy. But let's say Ricky does re-sign with the Pacers. Do you see a fit there? Can he coexist with Reese? I mean, he coexisted with Garland.
Oh, it's interesting. Like, I think a lot would just be, do they move TJ McConnell, which I think is entirely possible. I wouldn't be shocked. He hasn't really fit Rick Carlisle's offense, so I would look like I shouldn't say that. I would look to see them moving, but I would not be at all surprised if they look to move him. And I mean, like, if Ricky is signing on to be a backup point guard, like, there are a few guys who would be better to be a backup point guard for your team. Like, I think it's just been unfortunate with Ricky because he was so good for the Cavs this year. Like, this was like, I know the shooting numbers are what they are, but this was like the best offensive season of his career, or at least I should say shooting season. Like, he was like legit just taking shit off the dribble that he would never take before, and really aggressive. And he has obviously major athletic limitations at this point, but he was doing real work for the Cavs, and they've missed him a ton. So I would be totally open to him. And I know the front office before going out and signing and trading for Malcolm Brogdon, they were kicking around the idea of signing Ricky Rubio. So there are some connections there. So that would be interesting too.
Brogdon is also a trade candidate. Couldn't be traded at the deadline due to an extension he signed prior to the season, but I would not be surprised to see him be moved in any sort of potential deal. Last two thoughts for you real quick. We're not going to spend too much time. Buddy Hield was part of the Sacramento trade. Who's always been a good piece. I mean, he's a straight up movement shooter, which is one of the most valuable things you can have in the NBA. Rick Carlisle knows how to use them. You could see it in every game they've played with Buddy Hield. Milwaukee Bucks give up a ton of open threes. It's part of their defensive ideology. But
can I just say I hate their fucking defense right now?
The Bucks, man, they're switching.
They send two to the ball on everything. I'm like, if you send two to the ball every time and you play good enough playmakers, they're just going to pick you apart. Like, what? I just don't understand the point of it. But go pop off, bud. Do your thing. So.
It's been a struggle all season. Bucks fans all last season, especially in the playoffs, were saying, "Bud, you need to switch." Every single possession of every single game. That's how you'll win 82 games in a full season. Now that we've lost Brook Lopez for the year, we're switching more than ever before because we've got so much Giannis at center, and everyone forgot how to fight over a screen. I really don't understand it. Like, we've got guys like Wesley Matthews, who's one of the silkiest guys in a screen, just not even go for it, as if the team is just telling him not to fight over screens anymore. Really frustrating stuff. Serge Ibaka edition, we'll touch on this later, but the Serge Ibaka edition, they played a little bit of drop the other night against the Pacers. Yeah, just a little bit, not as much as usual, but Ibaka looks like he's going to be somewhat of a fix to that defense there. Everyone was clamoring for switching, and now we've seen that everyone switches. Guess what? Scheme versatility on defense is the key to things. There is not one that's going to win you every single game. And a lot of casuals, I follow a lot of this. This is going to be really quick. No one on Bucks Twitter listens to this podcast, so it's fine. But there's a whole lot of popular people on Bucks Twitter that are very big casuals, okay? So they're learning now at this point that scheme versatility on defense is the key to this sort of thing, and switching at all time isn't going to work. Big shout out to DeAndre Bembry, who was supposed to fix our injury concerns and is out tonight with a sore thumb.
Man, I'm excited though. I liked getting Bembry. Like,
Bembry,
I wouldn't have cut him if I was the Nets, frankly. But
he got the DeMarcus Cousins cut. He had a non-guaranteed deal. They didn't want to take the luxury tax. So they cut him. And the way I picture Bembry, he's a little bit smaller than Torrey Craig. But if Torrey Craig had played under Budenholzer in a previous stint and already had his chest, that's what you have in Bembry. Torrey Craig just couldn't crack the rotation for no reason. He was a great defender, couldn't hit a three, but a great defender for the Bucks last year. And Budenholzer just had the shortest leash on him ever. So Bembry, he was drafted by the team, the Atlanta, while Bud was still coaching there. He already has his trust. I'm sure he's going to be a regular part of the rotation. Let's move on to the Kings, who also made deals at the deadline. Obviously, the second part of this Indiana Pacers trade, they brought in not only Domantas Sabonis, but 2 3-and-D wings, which are those are worth protected or late first round picks in this NBA trade market. Maybe not Jeremy Lamb, who's dealt with a lot of injuries and has a medium-sized contract at this point, but Justin Holiday has been like a fifth starter level dude for a long time. And he is their starter at the 3 right now. And he's playing defense and he's hitting threes. The Holiday brothers are excellent in all facets usually, but they got those two guys, which are great. And then they added another wing. The team that really didn't have a ton of wings in the first place is adding a ton of wings, and they got in a 4-team deal. They sent out Backley essentially straight up for Dante DiVincenzo, which is not a heist, but they won that trade if it's one-on-one 100%. Dante hasn't shot very well in his first couple of games. Again, he's a Milwaukee Buck alum, so I watched him, but career high 5 steals the other night. He's going to have some sort of fit, especially coming off the bench with Davion. We'll talk about that. They also got Josh Jackson, by the way, another wing, and Trey Lyles, who we'll talk about this for a second, but I want to talk about Trey Lyles, the fit, in a little bit. When I took down some notes, they were 2-1 with Sabonis. I'm sure they've played a game or two since then. They got crushed by the Nets. Weird game. The Nets B team has been crushing teams for no reason for the past couple of nights after losing 10, 11 straight games. Let's start with the big one, all right? You wrote a piece on your Patreon, by the way. That link will be in the show notes, and you can find it. We'll be tweeting it out as well, but you should absolutely subscribe to the Patreon. It's $3 for the Enforcer, by the way, and that's, I mean, if your Patreon budget is about $20, you can put $3 in there. We all set a budget for that. The piece that I'm talking about is Fox and Sabonis. This is what Sacramento envisioned. Whether you agree with the deal to move Tyrese or not, the deal was they're choosing De'Aaron Fox as their franchise point guard, and his pick and roll partner, or his at least second star, is going to be a 2-time All-Star, arguably a better player than Fox at this point, Domantas Sabonis. And a lot of people kind of, I don't know, the first day on the trade deadline with this was that the Kings are going to Kings, and they traded Halliburton, and nothing's going to make sense. And then we watched the games, and people were like, oh, okay, it makes a little bit more sense. I watched the first game that they played together. Morale was very high. The Kings crowd was doing things, which I haven't seen a lot in watching the Kings. And Sabonis and Fox seemed to really like each other and somewhat gel. But to put it into sort of perspective, the way that I see it is that De'Aaron Fox is a slasher. He can shoot in streaks, and he can defend when he wants to and when he's matched up with guys that are much bigger than him. But the fit with Sabonis and Fox, I feel like, is almost that Sabonis can act like an initiator, a lot of short roll actions, but also just post him up at the elbow, and let Fox use his strengths, which is otherworldly speed and a great cutting, to sort of create like a faux Jokic effect in Sacramento. Maybe that's just because Sabonis is a white big, but I read the piece, so I am stealing a little bit from there, but how are you envisioning the Sabonis and Fox pairing? People on Twitter are acting as if it's not going to work at all. Part of that is because people treat Sabonis as a fake good player, like they treat Vucevic as a fake good player. Again, and that may be a big white man bias, but he's not. We know that Sabonis is actually a really good player. How are you feeling about this fit, both now, but also once they get some more, complementary pieces around?
Yeah. I think in a vacuum, you can look at this trade and be like, like, how can you give up Tyrese Halliburton? And I get that. Like, if I was a GM, I would not want to make this trade. Like, I would not have given up on Tyrese Halliburton. But I think it's less about them giving him up and more recognizing that Monty McNair does not have the luxury of missing the playoffs. Like, even then, they're not going to make the playoffs this year. They might make the play-in if things go right. I think the Pels will. I know they're getting absolutely canned by Dallas right now. But, like, if Monty McNair doesn't make the playoffs with this Kings team next year, he's sacked. Like, I think that's pretty straightforward. We've seen this happen over and over again with Vivek Ranadive as owner. As far as, making a trade, like, I think a lot of people look at Domas and like, oh, he's a finished product. And I'm like, well, he's 25 years old. I think there's another level for him to get to. The team was never built around him in Indiana. Like, that team was built around Victor Oladipo in 2017-18 and 2018-19 with the idea of it being built around him. It's never been built around Domas. I trust that the Kings are going to actually, at least hopefully, prioritize building around him and Fox. So far, I think they have. Going out and getting DiVincenzo, I really like that. It seems like kind of like what I wrote about, like they're really buying into the idea of a lot of elbow action, kind of similar to when Chris Webber was there, using a lot of movement on the sides and using speed and post playmaking to try and bend the defense. I love De'Aaron Fox. I think people got way too low on him this year. Like, he had I mean, he was kind of checked out earlier this season, if we're being honest, like just given how the season was going, and I would be pretty checked out if Luke Walton was my coach too.
Yeah.
But he's been good since about November. Like he got his shot kind of came along more. Like he's not shooting well from three, but his shot from mid range came back. He was better on the rim. His defense has actually taken an uptick over the last 4 games. It's still not perfect, but he's playing much more consistent defense than he had been prior. Like I think you can look at it now and be like, okay, I see the vision with Fox and Domas. A lot of where I'm going to be at with this overall in the trade they made is what happens in the deadline. But like you mentioned with DiVincenzo, like I liked going out and getting him. They obviously, they tried to last year. That did not happen, but he still has to get his legs underneath him. But defensively, like I really love that look. Like him and Davion have played together a decent bit. And it's small sample size, but I think it was like over 70 possessions. They have like they're allowing like 85 points per 100, which is like insane. And it shows on court too. Like they look really good together. Their shell has been so much better on the perimeter. They're always going to have questions about rim protection without playing a true rim protecting 5. But like there are other ways to protect the rim without having a rim protector. And I think that Sacramento's buying into that. I kind of see it with them, and it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to progress. But I don't think that this was like a total lost trade for Sacramento. It's definitely interesting moving forward.
It's super interesting, and I'm always for switching it up. The Kings haven't been stuck in NBA purgatory. They've been stuck in NBA hell for the past, 13 seasons? This will make it 14.
They're 13th almost 2 decades.
Yeah, 2 decades getting there. They're going to miss. They're 13th in the West right now, guys. Okay, if they make the play-in, it would be a stretch of wins, which we'll have to see if they can do that or not. Dre, what do you think about this fit? We've seen unorthodox fits in the NBA work before. Not that it's similar, but nobody really thought of the Anthony Davis and Boogie Cousins front court as something that was, like it would work, but not necessarily that it would fit really, really well. Fox and Sabonis have clear strengths and clear weaknesses, but there's a lot of talent between them. Probably the most talent between 2 players that the Kings have had since Weber and Divac were in town. How do you feel about that? Like, do you think there's a fit there? What kind of complementary pieces do they need? Give me all your thoughts, man.
I think the pieces are there, or I wouldn't say the pieces are there. I think the pairing could possibly work. I just think that we definitely have to give it more of an opportunity per se, because right now Sacramento, obviously I don't know if Kings fans should be optimistic or should they just, look at this as another wasted season. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, Sabonis is such a phenomenal player. Obviously, with the versatility they brings to the table, despite his inconsistencies on the defensive end. But besides that, he's a great talent. Obviously, like I said earlier, it seems like Sacramento really wants to build around Fox, and I feel like Sabonis can possibly be a great complement. But besides that, honestly, I would have to think of some great dynamic pieces that they could possibly get, possibly in free agency this season. But if they can get some right pieces around them, then I could possibly, I wouldn't say they'll be like a top contender in the West, but they can at least flirt around that play-in area.
For this season, for sure, they're still figuring out the pieces, but what I'm first, whether they should be optimistic or not, you can't ask Kings fans to be optimistic. That's a bit cruel to just ask that of them, I think. I mean, they are optimistic. From what I've seen on Twitter, I follow a few people, including some beat writers, and there seems to be more buzz around the team than there has been in a hot second. But this is the first time that they've really made that sort of change. Even when they traded Boogie, it was for Buddy Hield, who was expected to be the next Curry at the time, and I didn't disagree with.
It looks bad then. It looks bad now. I'll never forget that, man.
It's terrible.
Yeah, man they hoed that, man. Firing Mike Malone was just that was such a mistake.
Right after the All-Star game too.
Yeah, I mean they Boogie loved playing for him too, and that team was good. It was starting to look good, and then he got meningitis, and then it was oh god, taking me back to 2014-15. And I actually I don't know, man. Like the Rudy Gay to Marcus Cousins pairing was never fantastic, but I always loved it. So it's
Hey, the year that Rondo was there, that was a really fun year for
Yep.
Sacramento
yeah.
Kings basketball. I mean, that was Rondo, assumedly washed Rondo. He wasn't an all-star by any means, but he certainly, I mean, he's, what is it, like 5-6 years later, and Rondo's still in the league. Who expected that after the season he was coming off before the Kings season?
Right.
It was really, really fun. They've botched so many moves now. You can hope to be optimistic, but you can't ask it of the Kings fans. You mentioned complementary players. Who can they target? You can't really think of any off the top of your head, probably because Fox and Sabonis is such an interesting pairing. My question, because you've watched a lot of Sabonis mainly, and you've got pieces of him. I read your thread about Sabonis' defense, how underrated it is, how active he is with the hands. It reminds me a little bit of, not to say, I really don't mean to compare them, but Greg Monroe in switches is actually a little bit better than you would expect, and he gets his hands in the passing lanes as well as the dribbling pretty well. Even now, I've been watching him. Great reunion for Greg Monroe, the first big free agent
Dude,
signing.
I love Moose.
Moose is my favorite.
I thought it was gonna be the one, man, when he was in Detroit. He was so good.
Oh, yeah,
Like
he
he's
was.
just such a skill player. Part of this, I mean, I'm wearing my Georgetown shirt right now. I love Georgetown. If I could have actually gone anywhere, if I'd focused in high school and could have gone anywhere, it would have been Georgetown. But yeah, man, not to take over your podcast, but
Please
Greg
do.
Monroe is honestly, I think Greg Monroe has a better career if he is like coming into the NBA 5 or 6 years later. And like now that post passing and utilizing bigs who can play make the way that he can, like he's a guy who would average 4 or 5 assists a game now if he could, like coming out with his full skill set when he was like 20, 21, 22. But yeah.
When he signed with the Bucks, the fit wasn't good by any means, but the only reason that they were able to start those guys next to each other is because Monroe did have some passing on him. And yeah, would it have gone better if they didn't have Jason fucking Kidd at coach? Sure, 100%. But my favorite Moose memory is he signed with the Bucks. There's a video out there of old Windy Brian Windhorst, as in young Windy, and young Colin Cowherd spending no time on the Bucks, just saying like he picked them over the Knicks and the Lakers, and they talk about the Knicks and the Lakers for the next 30, 45 seconds, which was the most mentioned the Bucks got at that point in time. But when we recruited him, we had a video of Marlon Wayans as part of the recruitment, just
hilarious.
like talking shit about Milwaukee, making jokes, and that was part of the recruitment. Like we really treated. I mean, Greg Monroe was a max contract guy. He was a max free agent. Big shout out to Moose, who's very, very likely not going to get a second 10-day from the Milwaukee Bucks. Didn't play the other night against Indiana. Serge Ibaka obviously took that. By the way, one last thing while we're tying together loose ends. We talked about Boogie and Mike Malone. They are currently reunited in Denver right now. Obviously, It's not the same circumstances, but I'm sure Boogie likes to be coached by Malone, and I'm sure Malone has some thoughts. Not that he ever regrets going to Denver. Obviously, it's become a juggernaut of a team, but I'm sure every once in a while he looks back at what those Sacramento Kings teams could have been if he was able to stick around. Sabonis, front court fit. All right. I'm just going to power to the next segment because we got lost on some players that really aren't NBA players right anymore. But it didn't work with Miles Turner, who is, by all accounts, one of the best rim protectors in the league and one of the best three-point shooters in the league. I know, guys, that blocks does not necessarily mean that you're a great rim protector, but you can have blocks on your stat sheet and also be a good rim protector. It's not opposites. That doesn't mean that he can't fit with guys like that. But if you have essentially a 3-and-D center that didn't work with Sabonis and Turner wanted more touches, I personally do not think that he's going to fit with Richaun Holmes in any sense. They're staggering their minutes right now in Sacramento, at least from what I've seen. I saw some fits with Chimezie Metu in that thing. I'm not sure how much of that is longevity-wise, how it's going to work, but you watch Sabonis for a while. You're doing a podcast every 3 days, twice a week for a while now on the Pacers. Do you have an idea? It doesn't have to be a specific player, but a player prototype that would be, I mean, is it Harrison Barnes? Is it just a rangy four that can play defense and shoot threes? Who do you think is an ideal front court pairing for Sabonis?
Yeah. I think what's really tough is, and I'm not trying to say that you're wrong, but it's just like, Miles isn't that bad of a fit with Domas is part of the problem. Like, I think there were moments where it got highlighted and looked bad. Like, anytime they played the Celtics when Gordon Hayward was there, they were toast because just having to get out to the perimeter And especially the way that Nate McMillan had them playing defense. Like that defense was really good when Nate was there, but they were always struggled with Boston. Anytime that a team could really go 5 out could be a problem. But honestly, like a player who can shoot threes on volume and attack off closeouts like Miles can, while also being a significant plus defensively, who can cover for a lot in the back end. Like I thought that was a really good fit with Domas in some ways. Like even just like I don't love just chalking it up to what their numbers on court were, but I think they were a positive all 3 years that they were starting together. Like if you include this year, and it shows up on court. Like there's a lot of moments where it really works. I think offensively, like it can be clunky. Miles isn't awesome as a spacer. Like he's good at spacing out the three, but in terms of just moving within an offense, flowing in an offense, he's not. I mean, just that's part of him being a 5. He's not used to being at the 4 and moving like that, so it could be wonky for him. But I think the ideal front court partner for him is somebody like Jalen McDaniels. I mean, not Jalen, Jade. I mean, even like Jalen would be good too. I love Jalen. I think he's an underrated player for sure. But Jaden McDaniels is like a perfect guy, like somebody who can be really mobile, play backlines. Because I mean, Sacramento's going to have to really work in coverage versatility. I think Domas is a lot more mobile than he's going to get credit for. You can play a little bit of drop with him. He's not perfect at it, but he's good enough where you can make it functional. You can do some stuff close to the level of the screen. You can play him in center field. But I think a lot of it's going to be playing him close to the level and seeing if you can have like a rangy guy like Jaden who can roam backline and do some things for you there. But even then, it's like, I mean, I don't think Harrison Barnes is perfect as a fit next to him, but offensively, like, it's damn close because Harrison is like, first of all, man, shout out to Harrison Barnes. He's one of my favorite players. He's so good.
I love him.
Like his footwork is unreal. He's got such good footwork. One of the things that I've loved, like I think a lot of people wanted to see them trade Harrison, but I got why they ended up not doing it after trading for Domas. Like he is so good attacking out of the slot if he gets the ball swung to him. Like I think that's something that I honestly like. Part of the reason I was interested in the Bulls trading for Harrison is they've just kind of missed somebody who can be like that in the slot for them, who is an awesome spacer, who knows how to attack really quick and just like getting downhill too. Like his power game is ridiculous. So he's really benefited playing alongside Domas. I think he's averaging like 8 or 9 free throws per game over the 4 games they play together because he's attacking off angles on a bent defense and getting guys lacking, and that's huge. But yeah, I mean, sorry, I made that a really long answer, but Jaden McDaniels is like the guy if you compare him alongside anybody.
That's really interesting.
That makes sense.
Dre, I've got everything that I wanted to cover on Sacramento, even more so, honestly. We got previous Sacramento teams in the mix as well.
Yeah.
Based on these moves, we did talk a little bit. We could expand on the off night and DiVincenzo pairing off the bench. Just monstrous defensive effort and part of the closing lineups that we've seen in some games where it's Fox, Davion, Dante, Barnes, and Sabonis, which I think is a really good lineup that you can build on. But Dre, any last things on the Kings that you want to cover or talk about?
I think we're good, honestly. I think we just about dove into everything that we wanted to.
We did it. All right. That is the first guest of the Hoop Truther saga. You're going to see it everywhere. And we've got one final question that we'll be asking every guest that comes onto the Hoop Truther pod. Mark, there's a lot of NBA conspiracies out there. Our intro features one of the most famous with the Ewing draft. Is there an NBA conspiracy out there that you, doesn't have to be wholeheartedly, but do you believe in any of these NBA conspiracies that are out there?
Oh man, this is a good question. Because I was gonna go. You told me about this beforehand. I think I was gonna go with the Ewing one.
You can do that if
now that
want.
you did it. Well, now it feels like I'm copping out if I do that. Man, NBA conspiracies. I will say one thing that I mean. I was a Pacers fan earlier in my life. Now I'm just like, I just love basketball. I watch anyone. I don't really have any attachments to teams other than my sad ass Georgetown Hoyas. I think, well, not I think, I know. So after the Pacers in 2013-14 beat the shit out of Miami in Miami, and LeBron did not get a lot of calls when he drove on Roy Hibbert for verticality, a league memo got sent out. And then verticality started being enforced just like that, and Roy Hibbert's career fell apart. And it was, I mean, there was a lot that went on with his confidence and everything too, but he started being enforced differently, which was huge. I mean, he used to like I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but 13, 14, like he literally would like put his hands down like over people.
Yep.
And it was insane. Like I mean, I was talking about this with somebody the other day. In terms of like, when you if you can give up drive baseline or go into the middle, what would you rather have somebody do? Like the Pacers are the last team I can remember that openly just let people drive baseline, because like they played man to man, obviously, but it was like almost a zone because of how tight they were able to play it. Because of how the spacing was, but also like, I mean, it didn't matter if you wanted to drive baseline because Roy Hibbert's sitting in the fucking paint, man. Like he like literally for like about a year, like he was one of the most impactful rim protectors I've ever seen, and it fell off. But like the way that he was locked in, the way that he was able to play, and then after that league memo went out, it was downhill from there, man. Because the GQ photo shoot comes out. And it just destroyed like one of the most fun teams of all time. And I'm never going to forget about it. And I'm super pissed about it. And I understand why LeBron got upset, but I would have liked to see that Pacers team not fall apart, ideally.
Yeah, no, I mean, that team was, that team went toe to toe with Braun more times than you think. I mean, for all the, obviously the Paul George hate has subsided a little bit now, but for all that hate, PG was going at him and being clutch at it, however you define clutch.
Before he got injured.
People forgot.
Yeah. Oh, dude. Yeah, exactly. Like before the 13-14, before the end of the 13-14 season, like in that, even though they lose in 6 Eastern Conference Finals, like I remember like it was like a very real thing. Everybody's like, yeah, Paul George is a top 10 player now. Like, and I think he was 23, 24 at that time. So it's like, and then obviously he has the pretty catastrophic leg injury, misses almost all the next year. That team falls apart and it takes a while for him to get back. But I mean, obviously he's not a what if guy because he worked his ass off to get back and he's been incredible. But like, I do think about that a lot. Like if that injury doesn't happen for him, what does that look like? Not I don't really care about what it looks like for Indiana, if we're being honest, but like just for Paul, like, I mean, because it took him like a good 2.5 years to really get back to the player he was. So,
Mark, first, I'd like to say that we brought you in to talk about Indiana and Sacramento, 2 teams that aren't as nationally covered and aren't always in my repertoire in terms of teams that I talk about often or watch as often. But the nuggets that we've gotten beyond that about other players and previous iterations of these teams have been an absolute delight. Please check him out at mschindlernba on Twitter. It's going to be in the show notes. There's going to be a link to his Patreon that you can check out. The articles that he's writing, he'll be featured in our fave picks in this episode and far beyond that. Man, I just want to thank you one last time for coming on. It's a genuine pleasure to have you.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you guys for inviting me. This was awesome. I had a great time.
We're going to be transitioning now to another segment that I haven't decided which yet because I haven't stitched together the episode yet. Yeah, video is something new. We're going to get there at some point.
It's still episode 1. We're good.
It's episode 1. It's episode 1. We'll see you guys in a second, all right? We're going to go around the NBA now with... There's a lot of teams that made moves at the deadline that we're not going to be able to cover in depth, and we will over the next couple of weeks. But just to give you guys a little bit of nuggets of information on everything and our thoughts, we're going to talk about it. We'll start with the big one, Philly, Brooklyn. I actually don't want to talk about this in depth until we have Harden healthy and Ben Simmons mentally healthy enough to play. He also has to get back to conditioning. Neither have played yet. Harden said he will not play throughout the All-Star break. Jarrett Allen, big shout out to the Cleveland Cavalier, was named his replacement in the NBA All-Star game. Paul Millsap made his debut when they lost to the Celtics by 48. 9 points, 3 rebounds. As a backup center, that's pretty solid. And with Brooklyn, Simmons isn't ready, but Curry, Drummond, and I think that's it, have made their debuts. First game, which was a rout of the new Kings, the Domantas Sabonis Kings. Curry had 23 points, 5 assists, and 7 rebounds, which is fucking ridiculous. I mean, that's Steph numbers, not Seth. And Drummond had 11 points, 4 rebounds, or 4 assists and 9 rebounds, which is big man shit. And the Nets haven't had a big man since, I don't know, KD and Kyrie made the trade for Harden, I guess. So it looks like the new pieces that aren't the stars have filled out pretty well in Brooklyn and Philly. Dre, give me one thought on each team before we move on. We will cover these teams in greater length once the stars return to play.
So basically, to make it pretty short, I'm going to ride with the Nets as far as, who won this trade between the two teams, just because
I mean, we all know that James Harden is great, and I have no doubt that James Harden is going to be phenomenal playing alongside Joel Embiid. But the best productivity is availability to me. So
yes,
James Harden being around the early 30s, and that hamstring has been a big part of his career. It's been a big story for him. So the question is that did Philly give too much? And then also, I don't understand why the Sixers gave 2 first-round picks. It doesn't make sense to me, honestly. I mean, you already gave up Ben Simmons, you already gave up Seth Curry, you already gave up Drummond as well. But 2 first-round picks to the Brooklyn Nets, I don't know. It's like, I look at it when I look at the whole dynamic of the Nets. Obviously, Kyrie is not going to be able to play home games. I don't know if he will. I don't know if the Nets will pay the fine for him to play home games.
They won't. I don't think I don't think that's actually an option. Like, I don't think the NBA allows you to violate local law. Even though you could pay the fine, you'd still be violating local law, and I think the NBA doesn't allow that.
Okay, so there's probably no chance of Kyrie ever playing home games unless he gets vaccinated, which is definitely not an option for him.
Right.
So when you look at the trade, obviously, with KD coming back healthy, we all know what he can do. Ben Simmons, even though we have not seen Ben Simmons until recently, about a few days ago, but he looks like he's pretty healthy. He may take a few weeks just to get back in basketball shape, but once he comes back, we all know what he can bring to the table. And as I mentioned earlier, Seth Curry has been a great compliment for this team. So when I look at the package as a whole, I definitely like what the Nets have compared to the Sixers.
100%. I think the Nets added a lot. I think the Nets raised their floor significantly and lowered their ceiling a little bit. I think the Sixers lost a bit of floor and raised their ceiling. I mean, if James Harden is James Harden, that team could be the best in the East, and that's the bet they're making. Let's move on, though, to one of the other big trades of the deadline. We already covered the Pacers and the Kings. The Wiz and Mavs made a really weird trade where Kristaps Porzingis was sent to the Wizards, and Spencer Dinwiddie, who's been terrible all season, and Davis Bertans were sent to the Mavericks. Here's what I'll say. Kristaps hasn't played yet, so we have no idea. Ish Smith is like their starting point guard right now. They got him in the Montrezl Harrell trade, which is a long line of point guards that they've been trying to figure out in Washington since John Wall got out. But I thought it was terrible for the Mavs just because Dinwiddie's been terrible and Bertans has been unplayable. Well, guess what? A team with an actual guard that passes like Luka Doncic, Davis Bertans is usable again. His first game as a Dallas Maverick, they beat the Miami Heat, who have been monstrous. They won in double overtime against the Hornets tonight, by the way. Jimmy Butler hit a clutch 3 to end it. Bertans in his first game, 12 points, 4 for 8 shooting, 3 for 7 from 3. And they beat the Heat, who have been really fucking good, especially defensively. Maybe Bertans is usable for them. And honestly, that would be a pretty good side effect of this trade. Even if Dinwiddie doesn't work, I don't think it's going to. I think he might just be a little bit cooked after the knee injury. And that he can't bounce back, but it usually takes guys another season, 2 seasons to really fully get back into shape after a pretty nasty injury like that. So I just don't think it's going to happen this year. But Bertans, if he's a shooter again, that opens a lot of things up for the Mavericks, and that's really cool for them. Dre, thoughts on Mavs Wiz?
I don't really know how I feel about this trade, honestly. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a bad trade, but I don't know. Like, as crazy as it is, I've been on the train. I don't know. Like, I'm trying to keep hope for Porzingis, but it's just not really looking too good. I knew the Mavs fit was not going to end too well for him. But now even in Washington, I don't think that's a good fit for him as well. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. I thought I was messing up. But yeah, Porzingis going to Washington, I just don't think that's a pretty decent fit as well. But I mean, I like what you're saying about Bertans. I haven't actually watched the Mavs since the trade, but if he is a consistent shooter for them, then I mean that's definitely a great sign, especially for a Mavs team who definitely needs a little bit more of offense besides Luka on that team. And it's just so crazy how the Dinwiddie situation just didn't work for Washington. I thought he was going to be a great compliment alongside Bradley Beal, but unfortunately it just didn't happen.
As we're speaking, by the way, the Mavs are about to beat the Pelicans 124-118 with 13 seconds left, so barring anything unexpected. And Bertans is 1 for 7. So maybe he's not going to be
never mind. Take
Yeah.
that back.
But we'll see. I mean, the team does have better spacing and a lot more passing than that Washington Wizards team has. If they can get something out of Bertans, it would be a lot better looking trade on their end than just Kristaps for two dudes that don't play. Let's move on to the Rockets. You know what my original thoughts on here were? I actually wrote them in the script that you guys have peeked at a couple of times in this recording, but I didn't know what they were doing. Listen, if you had first round picks on the table for Eric Gordon, you probably should have done that. If you didn't have those offers and you were leaking information a la Daryl Morey to try and get people interested and then didn't get any offers, that looks bad on you too. Not trading Christian Wood isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. You're not going to trade a guy like that for 80 cents on the dollar. No matter how moody he's been this year, he's a young center who's got unbelievable scoring talent and some defensive potential. You don't just send him out for 80 cents on the dollar just because he's not as high of character as you'd like him to be. I was really upset with their trade deadline because they sent out Daniel Tice, a 4-year deal that they shouldn't have signed in the first place, over to the Boston Celtics in return for Dennis Schroeder, who I assumed they would waive just like they waived Enes Freedom. But they're keeping him. And at first I was like, what are you doing? What's the point here? You have Dacian Nix in the G League who you just signed to a 4-year deal that needs minutes in the big leagues. You've got Jalen Green, who fans are already saying needs way more touches a game. Kevin
Yep.
Porter Jr., who you're training to be a point guard. And even if you could use another guard, you're bringing in Schroeder to do this when you haven't let John Wall play all season. Just didn't make any sense to me. You know what? At least in one game, which is always a difference, it doesn't have to mean anything. We just saw with Bertans, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be good for the rest of the season. But for one game, it made sense. And it made sense because Schroeder, who has not always been known as a ball sharer, has been passing the shit out of the ball. He threw a couple of oops to Jalen Green the other night, making really nice passes to Jayshawn Tate and Alperen Şengün, who still is one of my favorite players. We'll shout out Şengün every time he does anything, man. Love that guy. It looked like they could use a veteran point guard. He's only 25, by the way, Dennis Schroeder. But on that team, he's a veteran, to show the guys how to run the floor and really pass the ball. Maybe John Wall couldn't have done that. He was always more of a scorer than he was a passer. I just thought Schroeder was that as well. And he's showing that he's really passing the ball. And if that's the Schroeder that they're getting, who's really feeding the young guys and really getting their confidence up, I can understand this trade a lot more. Let's move on because I don't think you can have many thoughts on the Rockets. To the Bucks and their move that they made at the deadline. They sent DiVincenzo to the Kings and received Serge Ibaka and 2 second-round picks in that deal, which I think is just a haul. To get 2 seconds is just John Horst knows how to use second-rounders, so I'm very glad that he added some more to his repertoire. The issue is the Bucks, who have been dealing with injuries all season, the day after the Dante DiVincenzo trade, they lose Pat Connaughton for what is reportedly a month to a broken fourth metacarpal on his shooting hand, which sucks, but he should be back for the playoffs, which is all that matters, but we need depth. We need more wing guys, and Dante would have been great to have with that. So we added DeAndre Bembry, who's going to be great. We talked about him a little bit earlier in the podcast. But the main thing that we're talking about here is Serge Ibaka. And I've watched the games and I have my thoughts on them. But Dre, in terms of the initial fit, the first fit, how are you feeling about Serge in Milwaukee?
I like it, honestly. I think you definitely bring another player who has a champion and that veteran experience. Obviously, through the past few years, we've only had a small sample of Serge just because he's been riddled with injuries.
Really injured, yeah.
So I guess you can see why that would be like a negative for the Bucks. But you gotta remember, Brook Lopez is out. I'm not sure when he'll come back. If he does come back this year, honestly, I'm not 100% sure. But having a defensive presence like Ibaka, if he can stay healthy, is definitely a plus for them. I kind of hate that DiVincenzo had to be a part of the trade just because I just love him in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And he's been in and out of the rotation for so long. But
also dealing with injuries of his own.
Exactly. But besides that, I personally like the trade. I'm not sure how you feel as the Bucks fan, but I'm not gonna say okay, how about this? I'm not gonna say I love it, but I also don't hate it either.
As a Bucks fan, I was really excited to see it, both in terms of like actual basketball analysis, but also like some ball don't stop type shit where it's like, listen, is Ibaka older now, dealing with a lot of injuries? Yeah. but he still was a DPO, like a consistent DPOY candidate for several years there. And even somewhat recently, 2019 isn't that far away. He was one of the centers that was the linchpin of a title defense for the Toronto Raptors. One of the better defenses we've seen in our time, by the way, and was recruited to the Clippers by Kawhi because he recognized that title defense was what he wanted to bring to the Clippers. Okay. I think that's great. He's scheme versatile. He can play the drop. He can switch a little bit. He was switching on to dudes the past couple of games and not like locking them down, but staying in front. All you have to do is stay in front as a big man, and you can switch in that scheme. He hit a couple of threes. He hit some mid-rangers. He's scoring in the post, and he's making his free throws. We've missed Brook Lopez the whole season, man. I don't know if you realize this. He played opening night and played well against the Brooklyn Nets, and we washed the Brooklyn Nets. And we couldn't do it. He left after that, back surgery. We haven't had him since then. Reports are we still expect him in the regular season before the playoffs, but I've been watching the Bucks without Brook Lopez the whole season, man, and it's been tiring. We're winning games, and Giannis is putting up career numbers because he has to. He's the number one he's always the number one big man, but he's the only big man. It's him and Bobby Portis, for the whole season. Bobby's more of a 4 if we're keeping it a buck. No pun intended, even though the old podcast name was No Bucks Given. So I guess pun was intended. I love Ibaka here. I'm not trying to overrate it, but he's played 30 minutes a game since we traded for him. That's 30 minutes a game at the center position that we didn't have before. And for him to be putting in production in those minutes, that's incredible. I think it's a great trade. Dante, we were always going to trade Dante. We tried to last year in the Bogdanovich trade, and it didn't work out. We were always going to move Dante, especially after we got Grayson Allen for basically nothing earlier this year. Let's move to the Raptors. Thaddeus Young is finally getting some minutes. At first, I was worried that he was just not going to be in the rotation like he was in San Antonio, and it didn't make any sense that Toronto acquired him. But after DNPs for most of the season, he didn't need a couple of games to get his conditioning in. He's out there. He looks pretty solid. I don't know if I would trade a first-round pick. Not that this draft is necessarily great, but in a year that you're kind of rebuilding, like the Raptors probably have enough young dudes, but you could always add more. Would you trade that for a 33-year-old guy in Thaddeus Young? Not necessarily, but who the hell am I to go against Masai Ujiri's wishes, who's, one of the GOAT GMs out there? How do you feel about that in Toronto?
I love it a lot, and I'm so happy that they got my man Thaddeus Young out of San Antonio. I have been complaining for the longest, especially considering like the last few years. That
he was great
Young,
last year, even.
Yeah. I mean, in Chi-Town. Now you come to San Antonio, and I'm thinking, yes, finally. But unfortunately, he didn't get the playing time. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because of his age. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know what's going on, but I'm happy that he is in Toronto. I haven't actually had a chance to actually see him in Toronto, but if he's playing well, then I love it for them. Toronto's, I believe they're in this 5th or 6th seed right now in the East. They are playing phenomenal basketball, so it's definitely a really good fit for them going forward.
The Raptors are currently 7th in the East. The Celtics, after their 9-game win streak, took them over. But yeah, still in that mix. They're going to be in the playoffs play-in tournament, which not necessarily was a guarantee, especially after last year. They got the 4th pick in the draft. That's how bad they were last year. Big shout out to Scotty Barnes, by the way. That kid can fucking hoop, man. I love that guy.
Hell yeah.
Pelicans 1-3 since the CJ trade. CJ's putting up like decent numbers, but you and I both didn't like this trade when it happened. Have you changed on it at all?
So when I first saw the trade, I actually liked it just because I felt like the pairing of him and Brandon Ingram would fit so well. But then now looking at it, I mean, it's decent, but I don't know. It's like, you're in a situation in Portland where, your team's not good. And, obviously there's no playoff like, hopes over there to another team that's basically has no playoff hopes. I mean, I know the Pelicans have been, up and down this year, but there's no playoff hopes for this team. I mean, let's just be honest. And then of course, we don't know what the hell's going on with Zion. So I don't know. It's like, like I'm looking at the long-term situation for this trade. Like, I mean, obviously CJ is going to get his numbers. He's going to be great for the team, but how will it benefit him going forward?
I understand that the team needed more perimeter playmaking and shot creation. And CJ, 5 straight seasons of 20-plus points per game? That's hard to do in the NBA. He's a certified bucket, I just would rather have Drew Holiday. I would rather have Lonzo Ball. I'd rather have both if you could have them. And listen, that's not a criticism of the Drew Holiday trade. All those picks and a couple of guys in return, you're going to do that every time. But they just got rid of Lonzo. I still don't like that move. And I'd rather have him than CJ right now, especially if you need to have some defense. Because CJ, Brandon, and Jonas, I don't really see defense there. Zion is like theoretically a good defender at some point with his athleticism, if he still has any after the injuries, and his size, but he wasn't a good defender when he was healthy before. So that's 4 negative defenders. And then Herb Jones is just out there. Big shout out to Herb Jones, by the way.
Herb Jones is
phenomenal.
A beast.
But he's not the guy that's going to tie your defense together at this point of his career. So that defense is going to be dreadful. It's going to be dreadful. Yeah, I don't know. Pelicans make me sad. Blazers also make me sad, but Justice Winslow looks pretty cool, and they're getting more minutes for guys like Trent Watford and Greg Brown III, who have been looking really good as small ball big guys. Don't want to talk about them any longer, though. Let's talk about the Suns, who got Torrey Craig back after they've traded for him at 2 straight trade deadlines, by the way. They got him from the Bucks at the trade deadline last year. Let him go to the Pacers because they gave him a decent contract, and they traded for him again at this deadline, as well as acquiring Aaron Holiday. I don't think Holiday's going to play that much, although Chris Paul injury, by the way, if you guys don't know, he's getting MRIs right now on the injury, and he's dealt with thumb injuries in the past, including tears that needed surgery. So we'll see that. Holiday will get a lot more minutes if he misses significant time. But I don't expect him to be part of the playoff rotation if hopefully they're all healthy by the time that gets there. Torrey Craig, though, was a significant part of their playoff rotation last year and should be this year. Great defender, great wing. The shot will fall occasionally, but it's not consistent by any means. I don't know. Give me like one thought on the Suns trade deadline.
I don't know. I don't really have much to say, but I mean, Torrey Craig is a great compliment to a team. So obviously, Phoenix had him last year, especially, during their deep playoff run. So maybe they look at this as another opportunity to just, get better and, try to go for finals again.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather give Aaron Holiday minutes than Alfred Payton, who they're playing in the
Yes.
Cameron Payne injury
I don't even
right
know how
now.
Alfred Payton's still in the NBA. No disrespect whatsoever. I just cannot believe a team like after the Knicks ended up actually signing Alfred Payton.
Yeah, man. Well, he hasn't been like dreadful this year, but it's been really limited minutes. Last team that we're going to talk about here before moving on is the Charlotte Hornets. They needed a center. They needed a big man. Honestly, if you want to wait until the offseason to trade a lot of stuff for a big man, I get waiting, especially if you're targeting Turner and you want to see how healthy he is. If you're fighting for a playoff spot, you can't really trade for a guy like Turner who's not going to be available right away if you're going to trade a guy like PJ Washington for him. So instead, they traded Ish Smith, who one of my favorite underrated guards of all time, man. He spent time everywhere. I really wish he was the backup guard and a contender because I think he could have been that the past few years really easily. And Vernon Carey Jr., who I don't know much about, but from what I've read, he is an interesting flyer at a big man. Not that the Wizards have any space for that. And they bring in Montrezl Harrell, who, listen, he has his faults. You and I have talked about his negatives on the court a lot. That's totally fair. But the Hornets traded a 33, I think that's what Ish Smith is, 33-year-old point guard and a guy who's probably not going to be in the NBA very long, and Vernon Carey Jr., for a guy that won Sixth Man of the Year like 2 seasons ago. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Here's my issue with it. I watched the Hornets a little bit last night. They're playing – they lost in overtime to the Timberwolves. They played double overtime tonight. A lot of overtime for the Hornets. They're playing Montrezl Harrell next to fucking Mason Plumlee. Where the fuck does that make sense? That makes no sense to me. Mason Plumlee has been not great all year, and Trez, neither of those dudes shoot. Why would you play both of them? Play Trez with PJ Washington if you're going to do anything. Why are you out there with Mason Plumlee? Man, I really, really don't get it. The Nikias, big shout out Nikias, as always, tweeted out a picture.
Hang on 1 second before we go. Nikias, if you're listening, join the show.
Yeah, come on. You're a truth of yourself. You got to come on at some point. And
we're going to break this small portion down, and we're going to post it, and we're going to have everyone tag Nikias.
We've got the basketball news boys coming on. We're going to have the whole collection at some point. But he tweeted out a photo of them playing with it, and the spacing goes atrocious, just terrible. I really don't understand why you're handling them, but we spent too much time on them anyways. We're going to move on now. That was around the NBA. Let's finish off with our fave picks of the week. And the fave picks, will be also known as the plug zone. The plug zone is going to consist of us plugging our own shit for sure, because we're both writing, we're both releasing stuff outside of the podcast. We're going to give the opportunity to plug our own shit, but also to plug our favorite stuff of each week. In future weeks, it'll be the best art, not best. Sorry, it's not a competition. It's not judgment by any means. Our favorite article, video, and pod of the week. Dre, I know you've got one or two things selected. Why don't you give us a little rundown of what you really like to see this week?
So I'm frequently reading articles. I mean, as a writer, man, you gotta get motivation from the people, man. You gotta get motivation from the other people and your peers. But there was one that I enjoyed the most. You know, every time I read any of this guy's work, I listen to this guy's podcast, I learn something new. Sometimes I go into there, I feel like I'm a dummy, and then I just come out like it's super intelligent when it comes to the game. And that's the guy that I just mentioned probably about like 30 seconds ago, Mr. Nekias Duncan, who we need to get on the pod. He recently wrote an article on basically breaking down the terrific pick and roll of DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic for the Bulls. And it was super phenomenal because there were certain rotations and everything that I didn't really understand. Because here's the thing: like whenever you read a Nekias article, he has like mini breakdown videos in between most of the paragraphs. And if you watch some of them, there's a lot of reads, there's a lot of scenarios that I never saw. And you know, honestly, when I think about it, that might be my favorite one out of like the millions that he has written over the past. But shout out to Nekias, man. Shout out to Nekias, man. We love you, bro. We need you on here. We're gonna do whatever it takes.
We'll get Nekias at some point. I promise we will. And that'll be linked in the. We're going to do tweets. We'll tweet out our fave picks of the week with links so you guys can check them out. Follow the Hoop Truther Pod at Hoop Truther Pod. Pretty simple. Go follow us there so you can get all of our fave picks every week in the plug zone. My favorite article of the week. We mentioned her earlier. It's the other half of the Indie Cornrows podcast. Caitlin Cooper at C2
Shout out to
Cooper.
Caitlin.
Really just been, I mean, she breaks down film on her Twitter.
She bodies it, man.
Yeah, it really just kills that shit. And if you wanted to hear about how Tyrese Halliburton was going to fit in Indiana, no better person to hear it from beyond Mark Schindler, who was on. Thanks again to Mark. But his co-host on Indie Cornrows is Caitlin Cooper, who wrote about the feel and functionality of Tyrese Halliburton, his fit with the Indiana Pacers. I really enjoyed it, and it really summed things up for me in the sense of how he's going to fit with this new Pacers team and what kind of pieces they could add around him in the future. That'll be linked. Go check it out in the future. The video that I wanted to showcase this week was KOC, Kevin O'Connor's The Void. He does these once a week, once every couple of weeks. And Kevin just does a really good job of breaking down film and what the fit is going to be with these things. And he gets a really good one for us. After the blockbuster between the Nets and the Sixers, he made a video breaking down how Ben Simmons fits on the Brooklyn Nets. Hint, it's the perfect situation for Simmons. It's shooters everywhere. He doesn't have to shoot the ball ever again, you know? And he breaks it down really well, smarter than the way that I just put it. That'll be linked. Check out all the Void videos, by the way. KOC always breaks it down. The podcast, actually, I've never always been a massive fan of the Athletic podcast. Sometimes they can be a bit standard for podcasts, I think. But Saturday Slam and Jam, hosted by Andrew Schlecht and Alex Spears, is really, really fun. They play a lot of games. They have a lot of segments, kind of what we're trying to do with this new podcast. And they did an episode on Saturday. It's called Saturday Slam and Jam. Trade awards, the Harden-Simmons swap, and the new look Pacers. They also do a game show at the end of it where they ask Andrew and a guest host questions about an obscure team or obscure questions about a team in the NBA. This week they did it on the Pacers, and their guest this week was Mark Schindler, who was on the podcast today. And it's just a great episode. It's a lot of fun. You don't always need to listen to the Dunker Spy is one of the best podcasts out there, but you don't always have to listen to stuff that's purely basketball analysis for an hour and a half, 2 hours long. I really like the entertainment stuff sometimes, and I think Saturday Slam and Jam does a good job of bringing both to the table. That's going to be the end of our fave picks for the week. And before we get out of the plug zone, Dre, What have you been working on? Anything you're putting out there these days? I know you're taking a little break from writing right now, so there's other stuff that you're working with. If there's anything you want to plug or your own channel, please do it.
Yeah. I'm actually about to get back into the writing soon, man. I mean, I think I'm starting to find that itch. You know, watching a lot of basketball, there's a lot of stuff that I need to break down. So I would say for all the fans out there, expect something possibly like a few days after the All-Star break. Make sure to check me out on Sir Charles in Charge. But besides that, follow us at the Hoop Truthers. You know, this is definitely something big that we're doing. Make sure to check us out. Then also, I also do a Saturday night stream titled Count the Buckets. So yeah, check that out. But make sure to definitely check out the Hoop Truthers. We definitely got something big, and we're gonna keep going from here.
We'll keep going. Please check out Dre's account at NickAndreATR on Twitter. He's always tweeting out hoop stuff, even when he's not writing. Check out Count the Bucket every Saturday. Some stuff from Dre. He's doing his own solo stream sometimes too, which is a really big step. I really like that shit. So go check it out.
Hell yeah.
On my end, you can give me a follow on Twitter. It's at _Gucifer on Twitter. That's Lucifer with a G if you care. Basketball. I'm usually watching hoops and I'm tweeting about it. I'm usually feeling pretty shitty and I'm tweeting about that too. So go and check that out. I wrote an article for Sir Charles in Charge through Fansided this week about the losers of the NBA trade deadline. If you guys want to go give that a couple of clicks, that would be nice for me. Beyond that, I think that's what we've got coming out. Follow us at the Hoop Truther Pod, or I think it's Hoop Truthers Pod. And if you're watching on YouTube, we have to do this now. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a subscribe, give us a like,
Definitely.
you know, give us a little comment, even
Follow
if the comment
us
is heckling us.
All platforms, YouTube, Apple, Spotify.
It's going to be audio on all the podcast platforms, and it'll be video. If you're not watching on YouTube, you're listening on audio. We're on YouTube now. We're on video now. And even if you don't watch podcasts, I know not everyone does, give us a little bit of support. Click on it for like 10 seconds and give us a view. And then give us a like, give us a subscription. That'd be super great. This has been the first episode. Dre, the first episode of Hoop Truthers. How you feeling?
Really good. It's great, man. Like this is definitely something big that we're doing. Shout out to Mark. Shout out to Mark who came on earlier.
Yes, shout out to Mark at Mark Schindler NBA.
Super dope basketball analyst who covers the Pacers and obviously the NBA as a whole. Just stay in tune for the fans listening. Stay in tune because we got other big guests coming as well.
We're going to have more. We're trying to have a guest every week, so keep an eye out for someone new every week, and we're going to keep adding segments, sometimes take segments out to add new segments in. Game of the Week, Team of the Week is staying. Fave Picks, Plug Zone is staying. From all of us here, Dre and I, the Hoop Truthers, we're hoping you're having a wonderful day, man. And don't forget.
Enjoy All-Star Weekend as well.
Enjoy All-Star Weekend, man. Shout out Cleveland, having themselves a little bit of spotlight. And listen, don't forget, the Hoop Truth is out there. Can you handle it?